Okay, welcome to Standard 1 Part 1 of Presentation Software. We're going to be creating and modifying a slideshow. Now before we get going, we're going to talk about good and bad design elements. So I've just gone out to the Googles and I've typed bad PowerPoints in an image search. And I'll show you some examples here of some things and why you maybe want to think about not doing them. First I'm going to show you is a slide that has just a ton of text on it. Now, unless you're sitting on the front row and you're an avid reader, this slide isn't going to do much for you. Probably the reason the author of this slide created it this way is they're not going to be comfortable doing the presentation, so they're going to make matters even worse and probably read every word on the slide until you want to gouge your eyeballs out. So when you're creating your PowerPoint, a minimum of text. You just want to have enough text on the slide to make your point without boring your audience. This is our next example of having too much text on your particular slide, and this has made matters worse because they've put a nice car in the background here. The car, sure, we're talking about vehicles in the text, but all the car does as a background element is just to distract us from the points we're trying to make. Sometimes we want to be really creative in our PowerPoints and try to get everyone's attention, so we might use different colors. I'm going to use this one. This really just kind of hurts my eyes. We've got yellow background with all these light colored fonts. Just not a good choice of colors. You want to stick with something a little more conservative. Here's another example. You don't need to try to be extra creative with all of your coloring. This is just terrible to look at, and I'm sorry I have to even show you this. And finally, background colors. This one, background color is changing as we go, and so it makes it hard to read the font as we're changing from word to word here. Another thing you want to think about as you're creating your slides is the effective use of graphics and pictures. The slide is designed for social change, and I'm not sure what the hot dog has to do with the whole thing going on here. And the bunny's cute, but again, I don't know how that actually fits in. So choose your graphics and backgrounds carefully. Another element to consider is the length of your presentation. Know your audience. Figure out what sorts of information you really need to convey, and then get that point or points across. This is a really bad day when you realize that you're on slide number 1 of 97. It means the meeting or the presentation is going to go really long. And finally, we have this little gem. This slide combines all of the bad elements we've just talked about. We have multiple fonts, we have distracting backgrounds, we have clip art that doesn't make sense for the presentation, we've got bad coloring. At first I thought this was maybe a good example of Poe's law, which is basically the law that says that unless the author tells you they're being facetious with a winky emoji or something like that, then it may be impossible to tell if they're being serious or not. In this particular case, I clicked through to the web page and the author really likes this. I'll leave that to you to decide, but for our purposes today, let's just say that we're not going to be doing things like this in anything you want to turn in for your work. Okay, for our next skill, I've downloaded a presentation I found off the internet. This was about creating effective presentations. I've done that so I can show you a couple of things in PowerPoint that are some of our next skill. That skill is to edit some basic slide master options. Things like the size, the theme, the font styles, or the sizes of those. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to our view, and in the view we have the slide master in the master views group. When I click on this, what I'm going to see is this is the master template for all of my slides. And this top one here, this master theme is used by slides 1 through 42. Next one down, the title slide, used by 1, 3, 8, and some others. Rather than creating a big presentation and going back and trying to change all of the different fonts to match, maybe you've changed something that you wanted to make different in your slide, we can do that here in the slide master, and this will be universal throughout the whole presentation. So at this point I have a I have a section header. It's currently used by no slides. So let's change this. Maybe we don't want to have this dark of a font. So I'm going to make this a little bit lighter here, a little more pinkish. I can close my master view. And now when I go back out in my presentation, let's come in between here. I'm going to insert a new slide. And this is going to default to what the last one was. If I go to my layout and I grab the section header, you can see that it's now got that pinkish colored font in there. Now each of these slides also includes the logo of the people who created this presentation originally. We've got the Kane project here. This is their graphic. And as I click on each slide, you can see that the graphic's in here. Let's go back into View, into our Slide Master. And you see that all of these, because this is the parent right here, these are the children. If you've ever done any genealogy or know anything about ancestry, they draw it like this. So you've got the parent here and all the children. This is a trait of one of the parents, and so this graphic appears on these slides right here. So it will be in all of the different slides that we have throughout the rest of our presentation. I can also add new placeholders. Now placeholders are these things that have room for us to put text or video or charts or something like that. So I'm going to go to my master title style. And I am still in the Slide Master, so I went to View, Slide Master, I've got the special tab open. I'm going to insert a placeholder. Maybe I want to have a space here for some text. So I can just come out on my slide and I can draw a space for some text. And here I have the same text that I have up here. It's got the same font sizes. So I've added that, and now this change has been made on the master title style. Maybe I want to change the color. I'll go to the background styles. Let's make just the master title side with this yellow on it. I close it, come back out to my presentation. You can see I've made changes here that show up, the coloring and other things like that. So there's that one there. You can see what we've been able to do so far. And the last thing we're going to do in the Slide Master for right now, we'll go back to View. Let's go to Slide Master. We can also insert some things. So let's go up to my master parent slide here, go to Insert, and we can insert headers and footers. So if I insert this, I can tell it I want it to have a slide number. I can put the date and the time automatically on here. So let's update it automatically. Let's apply this, and it should show up on this slide. Now when I close in my Slide Master, I have the date down in the bottom left-hand corner. Okay, now we're going to talk about animation. One of the things PowerPoint is pretty good at is having things come onto the screen, move around, and move back off. So we're going to start with our little cute bee we have here. When I click on the bee, we can now go to the Animation tab. So when I pull down this menu for the different type of animations, you can see there's essentially 4 different categories. We have the entrance effects. This is how it's going to look as it comes onto the screen. The emphasis effects, this is what's going to be while it's already on the screen if we wanted to do something to draw attention to itself. And the exit effects, which are how they are going to exit the screen. We can also do some things with some motion paths, and we're going to cover all of these in just a second here. So let's start with having our bee fly in. Now the default is for him to fly up from the bottom. You can see though that while I'm on this bee, I have the effect options. I can make him fly from some different directions. Okay, so that makes our bee fly in. He's flying in pretty quickly. To change that timing, you can see that I have that's going to start on click. The duration is for about a half a second. So let's make our bee take about 2 seconds to fly in. Okay, and so now when we run him, it's going to take us 2 seconds. Let's click on him. Effect options from the left. There we go. That's going to take 2 seconds for the bee to fly in. Now I'm going to also have our little flower come in, so it looks kind of like the bee is flying toward the flower. So our flower is going to be using also a, let's make it kind of float in here. And I want to put it at its final position as it floats in. And let's change the effect options. We're going to make it float up. So now when I run this is what I'll see. So I have to put my presentation into slideshow mode. When I do this, here pulls up my empty screen. So I click it the first time and my bee is going to float in or fly in here. I click it the second time, and the flower is going to kind of float up from the bottom. Now, the reason it's doing that is it's waiting for the click. I could tell each of these animations, instead of starting on the click, start with the previous action. The previous action, in the case of our bee, is going to be, I did it the wrong one. Let's start this one after the previous. On our bee is where I want to be. Let's start him with the previous action. The previous action for this was the start of the slide. Once the bee is done, I want the flower to come in. So we're going to start it after our previous. So let's go in and look and see what we've done. Bee flies in, flower floats up. So that's what we wanted to see. You can see the timings here. You've got these numbers that tell you the sequence of things and how they're going to be working. So next up, let's make our bee get excited that he sees the flower, and let's add an emphasis here while he's on screen. The animation I'm going to add, I'm going to have the bee spin. So instead of just going up to my animation tab and clicking on a new animation to spin, if I do that, I'm going to overwrite my previous animation. I don't want to do that. I want to select the bee, and I want to come over here to the advanced animation section and pull down add animation. So I'm going to make this spin, and you can see my bee is going to spin. Now it's going to get a little bit complicated because I have a couple of numbers now, and I want to be able to keep track of what it is I'm doing. So let's pull open the animation pane. The animation pane will show us everything that's going on. So we have the content placeholder, we have picture. Here we have on click. Now I want to make sure that as soon as the bee sees the flower float in, he's going to start to spin. So I don't want to have to click. I want it to be all animated. So let's right click here and let's start it after the previous items are done. So now what I have, if I come up to my first and I hit play, the bee is going to fly in, flower floats up, and then the bee spins. So I'm running them in that order. So these are with the previous, as soon as that's done, it does after the previous, and you can see I've now added multiple effects here. I'm going to work on putting in a custom motion path in just a second here. For my custom motion path, let's make sure the bee is selected. Let's add another animation, and again, here's our list. We have some pre-built motion paths in here. They start on the green and they end on the red. So if you're going to work with one of those, you can use that. Or a lot of people like using the custom path. Just don't get too obnoxious with these. So I'm going to start here, move the bee up a little, move the bee down. You can't see it because it's a white line. Move him up, move him back down, and let's put him here on top of the flower. Now I'm going to hit escape, and that's my motion path. Now you can see there's a couple things wrong here. First off, my flower is on top of the bee. That's because when you're working with graphics, you work in what are called layers. The first thing on the screen is typically considered the first layer. The next thing that goes onto the screen is the second layer, so it sits on top of that other layer. So I'm going to right click here on this, on the flower here, and I'm going to send it to the back. When I do this, let's come back here, let's play this. You can see now that my bee is landing on top of the flower, but he's also got some background on him. So let's click on the bee again. We have our contextual menu. Going to go to Format, and let's remove the background on our bee. Remember, anything in purple is not going to show up, so this eye is going to be a small problem for us here. So let's mark an area to keep. This eye right here. There we go. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to keep my changes. Click here. Let's go to the placeholder, and let's play it from here. The bee is going to fly down. The flower's behind. The bee has no background, so we don't have any interference. And since we don't have any interference, let's go ahead and right-click and make this start after the previous item. And we're now going to put an exit effect on the flower. So maybe the flower was just a mirage or something. So I'm going to go back to Animations. I'm going to add one more animation, and I'm just going to make it random bar out. So it's just going to disappear. So again, I can right click, I can start it after the previous. So now you have a list of what's going to happen. It's going to fly in, do a spin, So we're going to have the flower appear, he'll do the spin, he'll fly down to the flower will disappear. Let's play this and make sure it's going to work. So he flies in, there we go, sees the flower, flies over to the flower, and there we go. So there are some other things we can do with these animations here. If I right click, I can go into my effect options. Now this opens up a whole new menu. It's going to come in from the left, it's going to start smooth, it's going to end smooth. I can also change the timing. I could make it take longer here, or again I can go up to the timing group. Triggers are for another day, we won't mess with those. Let's make him spin maybe a little bit faster. So if I want to make the duration shorter, I can either do that here, or I could right click and I could go in the effect options and I can see a little bit more. I can do a quarter spin, half spin, clockwise, counterclockwise. Let's make him go backwards. So I click OK. Now it's going to spin this way. And all that's doing is changing some of the standard effects here. And then finally, if I needed to, I can reorder these. So let's make the bee spin. Make the bee spin first and then have the flower appear. So I can play it from the top here. Bee comes in, does his little spin. Here comes the flower. So the only thing that's changed was the way that those two things have come in. And I can do that very quickly here in the animation pane, just moving things around. And we are done with section 1 of creating a basic slideshow.